Hey there, guys. Brian here. Just a reminder that you can now support The Other 51. If you go to patreon.com/theother51, you can find out information there on how to make a donation or become a subscriber. Again, that's patreon.com/theother51. Thanks. Now on with the show. Every writer knows that the best conversations about writing don't happen in classrooms or symposia or any other fancy artisanal setting. They happen at the bar, usually after deadline. That's the vibe we're going for here. This is The Other 51, conversations with writers of all genres about writing. I'm Brian Moritz. Today's guest is Jen McCaffrey from The Athletic. Jen McCaffrey, welcome to The Other 51. Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
This is always exciting for me to have one of my former students or somebody that was in a class that I helped teach on the podcast. But this is unique because you are the first former law student that I've had on the podcast.
Yeah, comm law. That was an intense class, but I learned a lot, I guess.
Okay. I wanted to ask because now you've been out. You're a successful reporter doing this thing. You can tell the truth now that how much do you use comm law in your daily life?
I wouldn't say I use it a ton in daily life, but it was, I don't know, I guess like you kind of just like think back. I think back a lot to like different things that come up, whether it's, I don't know, just some of the random cases that have like involved the media over the past few years. I'll kind of like remember things that we talked about. I'm not like reading through the book that I still have, but it's a good reference.
You still have the book. That's impressive.
I kept the book. I figured I might need it at some point. So I haven't yet, knock on wood, right. But maybe you never know.
Right. So Jen was a student, and I was the instructional associate, the TA, basically, for Dean Rubin at Dean David Rubin at Syracuse when I was a master's student, and I think you were a senior that year. If I remember correctly. So I always like to talk with people from my Syracuse days, and obviously the Newhouse School has the reputation that it does. And I'm wondering how much, when you look back at Syracuse and you look back at your time there, how much did being at that school prepare you for the professional world?
I would say a lot. I was actually just talking with one of my friends the other day about that. Not only the classes, but just working at the Daily Orange, the school newspaper. The classes gave you the kind of basics and just kind of how to approach things, and then like the DO was just kind of really getting you to learn how to learn the business. Basically, I didn't even have a editor job or role or even a beat at the DO, but I was doing like football and basketball features. I did women's soccer beat at one point. But even just, so I wasn't as involved as like a Matt Gelb or Andy McCullough, who were right around, or Tyler Dunn or Connor Ward. Those guys, we were all the same age there. They were kind of there all the time, and I was kind of popping in and out. But even the experience that I did get there was tremendous. And then just, the professors, I took Michael Hederle was one of my adjunct professors for long form writing, and the stuff I learned in that class my sophomore year was invaluable. I learned how to put together some of these longer pieces that I really enjoy writing now. So, I don't know what an experience would have been like at any other school, but I know that, what I learned there was, got me where I am today.
What are some of those lessons that you learned in that long form writing class that you're still using today?
I guess just how to, gathering all the sources that you need. And he made us get at least 6 sources for the 1,500 word stories that we had. And that was kind of always something I keep in the back of my mind. You don't want to write like obviously a long story without several different, viewpoints and kind of countering things. That's kind of a basic thing, but just sort of how to, piece things together, and kind of make things flow. Sat down with him several times. I remember just kind of like going over things of, where to position, how to make a transition, from one kind of, topic to the next that made it flow better. And just, just I spent a lot of long weekends in the library kind of writing and rewriting and then kind of just like tearing through my own stuff, and it was painful, but it definitely paid off.
So those transitions, I think, are the hardest thing I still work with when I'm teaching, like the transition paragraphs, because it can be very, I think, natural when you're writing a long piece to kind of do like, a block of a person or a block of a story, and those transitions can be really, really hard to write, not much less teach too. I remember always struggling with that, and I think I still struggle with like teaching a good and a transition, because a good transition is like effortless when you don't even notice it, but that's so hard to pull off.
Yeah, absolutely. I know exactly what you mean. Yeah, there are some stories I'm writing, and you're trying to think like how you want to get to a certain point, but you're trying to make sure the reader can see the same jump that you're trying to make. So you kind of have to step back and kind of maybe even have somebody else read it. So yeah, it's definitely if it works, you don't even notice it, and then there's other times that you just kind of have to really work on something and make it flow.
And also, as we talked today, congratulations are in order. You have a new job that you're just starting.
Yes, thanks. Yeah, that's the site just launched, the Boston site for the Athletic. So yeah, it's exciting.
It just launched. We're recording this on Tuesday, April 10th. I believe today's launch day?
Yep, today's launch day.
Excellent. So have you been writing? I assume today isn't your first day.
No, yeah.
Okay.
We started last week. So I cover the Red Sox for the Athletic, and I was at the home opener in early April. So I've been working the past week or so, really just kind of compiling stuff and preparing stories for today and then the subsequent days.
Okay, I was wondering if you could trace your career path. So how did you get from that senior learning comm law from me and Dean Rubin to now covering the Red Sox for the Athletic?
Sure. It's been a roller coaster, so bear with me. Right out of Syracuse, I didn't have a job, so I moved home to my parents' house, which is in Seekonk, Mass, sort of down near Providence, Rhode Island, and freelanced for one of the local papers, the New Bedford Standard Times, doing a lot of high school stuff over the summer and really throughout the fall, high school football, soccer, all that kind of stuff. In the meantime, I had been just sort of either cold calling, cold emailing, trying to reach out to as many people as I know, using, some alumni connections at Syracuse for people to kind of connect me with someone they know at some, one place or another. Through that, I had actually gotten like another freelance gig. ESPN had a high school website at the time. So I was doing, and someone that had worked or had gone to Syracuse was an editor there. So I was doing longer form features on some of the top picks coming out of high school for the MLB draft. So that kind of fulfilled my long form love while I was doing the high school stuff for New Bedford. In the meantime, I had been connected with somebody through all these kind of phone calls and emails at Philly.com. They needed like a web producer, someone to kind of work on the back end of things. At the time, the Philly.com was the website for the Daily News and the Inquirer, and they were still sort of separate, unlike now. But they needed someone to do that kind of stuff. So it wasn't so much writing, but I figured I needed to kind of get a little experience, in the web editing side of things. So, and I also didn't want to keep freelancing forever. So I took that job in like February of 2011, March of 2011, I guess. And I was there for a few months, but I had moved down there and I was living with my best friend's parents. She lived in New York City at the time, and I was living like with her parents in like a Philly suburb because I wasn't getting paid a lot and driving into Philly every night, really. And I was there when the Philly season started and the Flyers and Sixers were in the playoffs, and it was the NFL draft, so it was big for the Eagles. So it was kind of a good experience in that sense. While I was down there, New Bedford newspaper is sort of a sister newspaper with the Cape Cod Times, and they had an opening. for a full-time high school reporter. So I flew back home and interviewed for that and ended up getting that job. So I was only in Philly for a couple months and moved back to Massachusetts and worked at the Cape Cod Times as like my first full job, which was about 11 months after I had graduated. And so I was there for from 2011 to 2014, mainly covering high schools, but also Cape League baseball. And basically doing a lot of work, copy editing work and just like editing work on the newspaper. I kind of had shifts in between my reporting work. I had shifts at night at the paper, just basically putting the paper together, pulling wire copy and writing headlines and cut lines and everything. And then during the day I would, go to games or things like that and write in between. And then, so I was there until 2014, but in 2013, the Red Sox had their big run to and ended up winning the World Series. And that was the year of the marathon bombing. So because I worked at Cape Cod, every now and then my editor would let me go up to Fenway and write, stories off of that were semi-relevant. Maybe a former Cape League player was playing with the Red Sox at the time, so I would kind of go and do that. But the Cape Cod Times didn't have a dedicated Red Sox beat writer just because there wasn't enough manpower. So every now and then for big games, for Yankee series, things like that, I'd go up and write stories. So throughout that 2013 season, I had been going up a lot to Boston to write various stories. And I was up there during the first game back from the marathon bombings and then just kind of kept going back every month, made a bunch of connections with some of the other writers, including, I know, Evan Drellick, who I know you know. And Evan at the time was at MassLive. So at the end of the season, he was getting, he had taken an offer to cover the Astros at the Houston Chronicle. And so his job at MassLive opened. And he knew I was trying to kind of break into the Boston scene after, 3 years or so on the Cape. And so, he had told his editor, to look out for me or whatever. And I was among the people that interviewed for that job and ended up getting the job to help cover the Red Sox. Jason Mastrodonato had gotten the full-time Red Sox job, and I was hired sort of as a general assignment pro sports for MassLive. So Jason and I kind of worked together all of 2014 covering the Red Sox, but they also had me doing Bruins and Patriots because the Patriots ended up going on to win the Super Bowl later that year. And then Jason ended up leaving for the Boston Herald, so they moved me into the Red Sox role full-time in 2015. So I've been Red Sox beat reporter since 2015, so the last 4 years or so with MassLive, and then I'm just recently, a couple weeks ago, was hired by The Athletic, so moved on from MassLive to The Athletic. So
what attracted you to The Athletic?
Pretty much just the ability to be able to focus more on doing longer, deeper pieces. MassLive, I had to kind of do everything, and that was a great experience, and kind of being able to do everything, but at the same time didn't have a lot of time to focus on digging into different things. And I really liked the idea of being able to just spend more time and kind of get something, the full story behind something, as opposed to just kind of writing a feature, in between everything else, and maybe, feeling like I might have missed something because I wasn't able to focus fully on it.
Yeah, the baseball beat, as we'll get to in a second here, is such a grind in terms of the daily news and the comings and goings and roster stuff and all that. I imagine it's really, I had this when I was covering minor leagues. I can't imagine what it's like at the big league level, but there's just so much daily stuff to do. There's so much game and lineup and who's getting sent up, who's getting sent down, who's rehabbing and all that. It's got to be a real challenge to try to break off of that kind of hamster wheel every now and then.
Yeah, absolutely. And in a job, my previous job with MassLive, we'd write about everything, and kind of have a post for everything. That's just how the site worked. And so it was good to kind of have all that information. But yeah, it didn't provide a ton of time to be able to do some of the longer pieces that maybe, some of the things that fans are interested in terms of just, who's this guy in the organization, or why is this guy struggling? Let's look at his numbers and kind of go deeper into things. When I wanted to work on something long, I really had to kind of end up working a lot on my own time and that kind of thing. So I think The Athletic really values, kind of focusing on those one stories, and we'll just kind of tweet out the lineup changes, and we don't need to write posts about every injury update unless it's a significant one. And kind of going about the coverage that way.
Do you get the sense, and I've often wondered this, like I know we as writers love long form pieces, like we love doing them, we love reporting them, we love kind of having that ability to do that. Do you get the sense that, and you mentioned this, so you probably do have a sense, but how much do readers enjoy that as opposed to kind of like the news and nuggets, news of the day type stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely a mix. Not everybody likes their news the same way. It's not like a one size fits all thing. There are people that do just want those nuts and bolts and that's it. But there are people that really enjoy good, strong journalism. And I think there's a large portion of people that like it. And I think we've seen that so far. I've gotten so many messages from people being like, this is so cool what The Athletic is doing. And, and just kind of focusing on this longer stuff. And I think people really like, the story behind the story. A lot of times I just kind of focus on the idea that, we're covering these athletes on a day-to-day basis, and fans forget, that they're human beings, and, there's real life stuff going on with them. And people get mad at their bad day on the mound or their slump at the plate. But, a guy like the Red Sox closer, Craig Kimbrell, had to miss a few weeks in spring training because he has a 4-month-old baby that needed an open heart surgery. And she had another heart surgery when she was 4 days old. So, there's things like that I, think, normal everyday people like us can relate to these superstar athletes as just being everyday people with human issues and elements. And I think being able to highlight that in some of these longer pieces, or kind of just dig into people's backgrounds and show how they got where they are, really interests a lot of people. And like I said, it's not going to interest everybody, but I think people do like to sit down and kind of get away from just the day-to-dayness of get away from their day and kind of read something that's well written and well reported. And I think that's where The Athletic comes in.
Yeah, I've been impressed since I started reading The Athletic at how, and I'm doing a lot of research projects on the site and looking at the types of stories that there are, and how not just long form it is, but how it is very much not. It doesn't seem like you guys are competing with ESPN for that kind of like up to the second news and transactional model, which I find interesting because, like you said, and I think, like you said, there's an interesting thing of it. You don't have to be one type of reader. Like you can like both of them, and you can find you can find what you want wherever you at the site you want to.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's what it boils down to is, you might want to get your all your information on lineup posts and every injury update and every press release and things like that from MassLive or ESPN. And if you want, some of the more consistent, I guess, deeper looks at, analytical issue, just analytical things going on in the organization, or deeper profiles, or really anything, then, maybe The Athletic is where you turn for that. So I think we have to give credit to the reader to be able to kind of parse out, their different outlets of where they're going to get their information.
So this is, I'm looking through the list of previous guests I've had here, and you are one of the first full-time baseball writers that I've had on here. I'm amazed at that. I've had people who cover baseball, people who write about baseball, but not like a newspaper, what we think of as newspaper-based baseball reporter. So, and I having covered the sport for a while, I know what the grind is like, but what is, like, walk me through a day at the ballpark in the life of a beat reporter.
Sure. So I guess we'll go with the night game because that's when most games are played. But for a 7 p.m. game, I'll usually get to the park around 2. Clubhouse opens, and so I'll get to the park, get up to the press box, kind of like set up, and make sure nothing's happened in the 20 minutes that it took me to get to the park. We'll head down to the clubhouse. We have about 50 minutes that we're allowed to be in the clubhouse per CBA basically rules when we can get interviews done. And that's usually from about 3:10 to 4 p.m. So we'll kind of, any interviews that we need to get done with guys for more immediate things, we'll try to find them then. They're not always hanging out around the clubhouse, which has become an issue in more recent years. But we have that time then, and then we'll meet with the manager for about 20 minutes around 4 o'clock, and that's when we get any injury update and anything we can ask that's going on with the team. And then from about 4:30 to 6:30. People that do need to, write before the game, if you're working for a newspaper and you're on deadline, you'll kind of pre-write your notes and things like that off of, what happened in pregame. I'll use that time now to kind of maybe go down to the field because that's when batting practice is, and you can kind of get guys kind of coming off the field. If Fieldhouse, that's another time to kind of get your interviews done with players, or go over to the visiting side of the visitors, the visiting team, and go over and catch any of those guys that you might need. And the coaches are kind of roaming around the field, so if you need to grab anybody there, that's when you can do that. Then the game starts, and a lot of people just think you're sitting there and like kicking up your feet and watching, but it's I always have about 10 or 12 tabs open, I feel like, of different stats that I'm looking up to provide context for people of, this guy's at the plate and this might be what he's doing and, why he might be doing what he's doing, or, watching the defensive shifts that they might have and all that. So you're kind of constantly on Twitter monitoring things. And then after the game, head down to the manager's press conference that we have for about 5-10 minutes, and then into the clubhouse, talk to anybody that's had a big game or or a bad game, and then head back up and write. So that's kind of I end up getting out of there around midnight or so, and then head home and wake up in the morning and make sure nothing happened overnight, and then start the next day.
I just remember from my baseball covering days that no job I've ever had involved more waiting than being a baseball reporter.
Yes, there's a lot of standing around and doing nothing because you're waiting. If you're trying to get one of those guys in the clubhouse and he's getting treatment or he's in the cage getting extra swings, you're just kind of standing there waiting for him. So it's a lot of just kind of patience, but we still need that time, obviously, to be able to get the guys. It's just a lot of times you're just standing there and, kind of hanging around but the other thing, there's been a lot of talk in recent years, especially coming from the player side of, why do they even need to be in the clubhouse? Reporters, they don't even need to be here because they're just standing around. When I'm waiting for a guy, I think you as a reporter kind of use that time to kind of just observe different things. What guys are hanging out with each other. What conversations are going on. You might see a picture in a guy's locker, and you bring it up as a conversation. And maybe find a story out of that, or you might see different relationships of different guys and know who you can go to when you're doing a story on one guy. He might, one of his good friends on the team, that he hangs out with this guy a lot. So while we're not like, talking to people, 100% of the time during that hour or so that we have, there's a lot that you can observe and just notice and, add to your story or just add context for yourself when you're writing and reporting on things.
So I want to know, what's it like covering the Red Sox?
Hectic. It is pretty crazy. I think there are about 16 traveling beat reporters, and most teams have 5 or fewer. And even New York, the Yankees are in town this week for the first series against the Red Sox. There's obviously a rabidness among Yankees fans in the with the team, but even New York writers say it's just different. It's just a different, it's just a different animal in Boston, I guess. I honestly don't really know what it is because every city's passionate. Obviously some more than others, but you can't say that Boston is the most passionate. That's obnoxious and weird. And, I think that Boston fans like to, say that about themselves, but I don't even really know, what makes it so intense here, but it's just it's like beyond 24/7. I've had off days and brought my laptop to the bar with my friends. I've written stories from the bar. I've had my laptop, I've brought my laptop on a run and left my backpack in my car because if I got a text, then I would run back to my car. It actually happened the other day. I was supposed to be meeting with Dave Dombrowski, and I thought it'd be a little later in the day, and the PR director texted me while I'm training for a half marathon. I was in the middle of a 7-mile run and texted me and said that Dave would be ready earlier than I anticipated, so I had to stop, and I ran back to my car, and then he texted me again. He's like, actually, no, he can do it at the same time. So I turned around and finished the run, and then went home and changed and showered and went to the park to meet him. But I was like, this is typical baseball lifestyle here. But yeah, it's just it's a lot of competition on this beat. There's so many people, and everybody's so experienced, so that makes it a little harder too. As I'm not a brand new reporter, but relatively to the other guys that have been covering this team for 10, 15 years, and the relationships that they have, you always kind of have to work around that as well. So it's just, it's just very competitive, in terms of, who's getting what story. And, but at the same time, everybody gets along. It's a very interesting environment. I don't think I'd want to, I would cover baseball other places, but I think it would be very different. And it wouldn't have maybe as much of the adrenaline, I guess, as it does here.
What was that like when you first started on the beat, or even first started going to games back when you were in Cape Cod, or maybe when you started on the beat at MassLive, to kind of step into this full time?
Yeah, it was very overwhelming. Not going to lie about that. It took me a solid year just to kind of figure out, and I even heard that from all the, other reporters, that first year when you're on the beat, you're just basically trying to keep your head above water. You're trying to get everything down, get all the basic stories down, and then you can kind of try to start to find stuff outside the box. But really it was overwhelming, but, it was trying to take, one day at a time and do what I could. And I wanted to stand out, but at the same time, I wanted to make sure I was getting everything done. And just learning people, in the organization, not even the players, the players are one thing, but, the coaches, but the front office people, and just, the ownership and, so, I mean, a lot of that first year, the guys on the beat that, Alex Spear, Rob Bradford, Evan Drellick, Tim Britton, while he was there, Brian McPherson while he was there, Michael Silverman, they were all so tremendous and just kind of, giving me tips and guidance and, this is that person and just kind of helping me out. which was invaluable. And then you kind of just, naturally start picking things up. But that first year it was a lot. And then you kind of just get into a groove. And here we are.
Yeah, I was going to say, so like when you're in the middle of that overwhelm of that first year, like how did you handle that? How did you kind of like was it just a matter of like getting through the day, or what did you kind of do to stay above water and get to that second year where things start to click?
Yeah, some days were kind of just, some days were easier than others. Some days were kind of just, just get the basic stuff done. There were other days where I'm like, okay, I'm going to see if I can start working on this longer feature and figure out who I need to talk to and, try to help make myself stand out a little bit. In the middle of that season, it was a crazy season too. They weren't doing very well. It was one of the years they finished in last place. And in the middle of like the 8th inning of a game in mid-August, we got a press release. It was like we had no like wind of it either. We got a press release that they fired the general manager and we're bringing in Dave Dombrowski. This was in 2015 when I was on like my first full year alone, or as the full-time Red Sox writer. So it was kind of like what? Like, you were in the middle of writing your game story because it was the 8th inning. And so it turned into like mass chaos of, what we need to like write a breaking news story. We need a context story. We need, to contact as many people as we know. We need to figure out like how, why, what was the timeline here. So they had like a press conference, right after the game. Like the game story basically became moot because it was like, they weren't even in it or even close to being in it. So it was kind of like, this isn't important at all. And just completely shifted gear at, the late in the night when we were expecting the game was going to be over soon. And then the next morning they had the big, introduction of Dombrowski. So yeah, it was just kind of like keeping on your toes a lot and figuring out a lot of things and figuring out, who to talk to about what. And it was just a huge learning process, I guess. And just you're working hard your whole life to kind of get to a certain point in your career. And, covering the Red Sox was kind of there, but then you get there and you realize how little you know about everything else that kind of goes on. So it's kind of like a reset of, okay, I made it like here, but also I have so much farther to go to, be, what I want to be or the reporter I want to be. So yeah, it was I guess a reality slap in one sense, but also just a lot of patience with myself and kind of, I know I'm not going to get all these like big breaking stories right off the bat.
What's the best thing you've read lately?
Well, this is gonna make me sound like I have to pump up Chad Jennings, who's my Red Sox beat writer on The Athletic. He wrote this crazy feature today about the Red Sox have these scorecards that they are like these little cards that they keep under their hats for defense, to help them figure out where they should be positioned defensively for shifts against different batters. And they have each player has like a dot that's color coordinated, and they know where to go when what guy's up at bat. But Chad did this like deep dive into figuring out this guy in the Red Sox analytics department who used to work in the military in the middle of like the Cold War. He had to be in charge of like a 500-person crew. So he basically had to, he was like an engineer of some sort. So he had to be able to communicate complex things to a large amount of people, very like concisely. And so he got hired by the Red Sox recently, and he's the one that kind of developed these cards for these infielders. And Chad just had this really crazy story that I had no idea this guy was, in the organization, and it was awesome. So it was a really good first story for him. And yeah.
That's awesome. So continuing to pump up the Athletic, I can promote or talk about Jeff Pearlman's column that he wrote. I forget when it came out. I just read it the other day about his daughter and how she found and her water polo career and how much it helped her physically, and just his reaction as a dad to watching her kind of find her place with everything she's gone through with health-wise, being able to fall in love with water polo and how and play the sport, and obviously, playing the dad card, that's going to hit me. But it is a wonderfully heartwarming, heart-rending column. It's just really, really, it's sweet. When Jeff writes about fatherhood, it's among the best writing out there. So that got me recently.
Absolutely. Yeah, I saw that the other day. I haven't been able to read it yet, but I saw the link and I was like, oh, I need to read this. I know this is one that I want to read.
Yeah. Jen, if people want to follow you and follow your work, where's the best place to do so?
Well, Twitter, I'm on Twitter at JC McCaffrey, MCCAFFREY. And theathletic.com, the Boston site, is where all our stuff will be. So that's probably the best way.
Awesome. Well, this has been a lot of fun. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
As always, thanks for listening to The Other 51. You can find show notes for this episode and all our episodes at sportsmediaguy.com on the Other 51 tab. You can subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. I can highly recommend Overcast for this. Our theme music is by Ellie Moritz.